Welcome to Talk to Me. I'm your host, Brenda Warren, the Solutionist. I see things other people often miss. I help entrepreneurs, veterans, and authors turn their mess or their mission into a message for the masses. And today I have a question for you. Are you ready to stop having tantrums, meltdowns, miscommunications, and just that all around, I can't take these kids anymore? Well, then I have the guest for you. Today, my guest, Katherine Sellery, is the CEO and founder of Conscious Parenting Revolution. She helps individuals minimize misunderstandings and meltdowns in order to communicate with more collaboration, cooperation, and consideration. She's the creator of the Guidance Approach to Parenting, a program that applies conflict resolution skills to communicating more effectively with children. Katherine has positively influenced relationships for generations and brought about healing and reconciliation in families that were suffering from disconnection. For over 20 years, she has taught and coached thousands of parents, educators, social workers, and medical professionals in half a dozen countries through her popular workshops, coaching programs, TEDx talks, and her upcoming book. Katherine is also a trained mediator, attended law school, has certifications in different trauma models, teaches a breathing meditation modality with the Art of Living Foundation, and ran her own commodities trading business in Hong Kong for 30 years, y'all. Katherine is a three-time TEDx speaker and has released a free ebook called The 7 Strategies to Keep Your Relationship with Your Kids from Hitting the Boiling Point. For her expertise, she has been featured in the Atlanta and Co., Fox 31 Denver, for CBS Denver, CBS 8 San Diego, and has been a guest on over 20 podcasts. I am happy to welcome to the show, Katherine. How are you doing? And we are ready for the revolution.
Yay! Let's do it, Brenda. Let's do it. Fantastic. It's so nice to be here. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad you're here. And the truth is, I wish I had you when my child was young, because my child is 20 years old. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of meltdowns, a lot of tantrums, a lot of miscommunication, a lot of, if you just don't get out my face, kid, I'm going to kill you. It's the truth. I'm not going to win Mother of the Year, but the child's still alive. So having someone like you would have been a blessing. And so my first question for you is, how did you decide to start a conscious parenting revolution?
Well, it's my own journey. Like so many of us, we end up teaching what we need to learn. And so for me, I grew up in a, dysfunctional family system, and I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know even what the word meant. And it wasn't until my husband and I had our first child, who's now 26, that we started the journey of becoming conscious about the ways that we communicated, the way that we saw disruptions, or the ways that we saw any of the meltdowns, all of it. Like, we were just deer in headlights, because we know this precious person that we were gifted to be able to bring up in our family had developmentally completely normal behaviors, but nevertheless, they were triggering. Nevertheless, we would get irritated and find ourselves upset. And I just kept thinking, this cannot be the right way. There has to be another context to hold this whole parenting journey that I just don't know. And so we started our journey back then, literally he was probably about 2. And so 24 years ago, I started taking parenting education trainings, and it just became my passion as I understood more and more about human dynamics and ways of monitoring, my own responses, and becoming more aware and conscious of when I was triggered, and that I had at the stage back then, once upon a time, no sense that if I was triggered, it was all about me. It was really a revelation to me to begin thinking that way. And over the years of the trainings that I was able to take advantage of, and eventually develop my own training, I feel like I got to bring the best of all of the trainings that I've ever experienced into the Guidance Approach to Parenting, which I co-authored with a child educational psychologist, Dr. Louise Porter, and another colleague of mine, Claire Snan Jameson. And the three of us spent a year literally writing the program that I've been teaching now for the last 13 years.
Now, you use the term triggered, and for me, triggered has always meant trauma. So I find that interesting, the terminology, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because I used to always say, kid, you didn't come with an instruction manual, and I don't know how to do this. Because sometimes when I think back on it, having my child was a traumatic event for me. And I was like, because I didn't know what to do with this whole nother little soul that everybody expected me to be this great, be all, do everything with. And I felt confused more time than I felt enlightened.
Yeah, there's nothing like children to be our teachers. And if we see our children as our teachers, then we have a completely different perspective on all of what we're going through. But they do bring up our unresolved trauma. And they do bring up, every time we're triggered, it's something in me that is being agitated by this external event. But just even that mindset of being able to acknowledge that there's something in me that's being triggered by this behavior, that the behavior is actually you, separate human beings, struggling with your emotions, with your overwhelm, developmentally, wherever you are on the scale of 0 to 20, as a growing, human being. But there was no sense of that. I grew up in the land of do as you're told.
Right.
Don't embarrass me. What will the neighbors think?
Yes.
And in that land, everything is focused on other people's experience of me, rather than me staying connected to myself. And so that generation, I believe, was very concerned with what other people thought of them, very concerned with appearances. Not that it's that different now, but I do think that there has been a shift in consciousness around when somebody else is falling apart. It's not really about me.
Yeah.
It's about them. And if they're falling apart, I can be angry with them because they're using words I don't like. Yeah. Or I can see that, oh my goodness, this is what we call the tragic expression of the unmet need. This is someone drowning, overwhelmed by the emotion, not being able to stay centered within themselves, not being with what's happening inside, but being merged with it and losing themselves in it, for which I have tremendous empathy when that is happening around me now with anyone, including myself.
Now, when we think about the training that you've had now, Katherine, looking back on raising your child, do you provide like a checklist for like new parents of things to expect or how to deal with these little individuals that have their own personalities, their own needs and wants? Because honestly, I'm telling you, there was no conscious thought in my head that Alex had free will, if that makes any sense. It was kind of like, you're supposed to do what I say, when I say it, how I say it, regardless of how you feel about it.
That's what we grew up with, isn't it, Brenda? I mean, that's how I grew up. And it was disrespectful for me to have a different feeling or a different thought about the directive. If I had a different feeling or a thought, it wasn't to be expressed ever. No. What was only allowed was to do as I was told, so that I was a good girl and that I would be praised for how cooperative and easy I am and helpful around the house. And I was so connected to my mother and wanting to have her happy with me that, I was not the one who was going to defy her. I wasn't that child. And, I am highly autonomous actually in so many ways, but I didn't act that way. There's a lot of other words that I use for it now. One of them is cathected. And that's a word that I got from Alice Miller when reading the drama, The Gifted Child, which changed my life. And she was able to explain when the caregiver requires that kind of obedience and compliance in order to feel mirrored by their child, that their perspective, the child is validating the caregiver's perspective and never objecting. And it's because the caregiver themselves didn't ever receive the validation in the acknowledgement as a child. They're still trying to get it as an adult.
Sounds like a dictatorship.
Yeah, it's like a dictatorship. It really is. And families kind of have that role with a lot of mothers or fathers or both taking on that, you do as you're told, damn it. or
Mhm.
you're disrespectful and I'm going to send you to boarding school or military school or boot camp or this and that. And people get farmed out because they have differentiated. And separation and differentiation is definitely one of my little like drums that I beat. It's something that's so crucial in human development to allow someone to separate, individuate, have their own perspective. Even children are people too.
And here's the thing, and can't there be like a, what do you call it, a shifting for those parents of today? Like I've seen somewhere the child is given just too much freedom. Is there a thought about that? Because there were times that I thought, when I got to a point where I thought Alex is kind of strong-willed, and instead of trying to beat that down, I asked myself, okay, this is just who this person is. How do I allow that without, as long as they're not committing murder or killing themselves?
Hmm.
And so the people around me would
Hmm.
shame me for allowing my child to have free thoughts.
Yeah, it's so true. So, I mean, what I would say about what you're bringing up is that a lot of times I run across the mindset that if I'm not being that authoritarian parent,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm being the permissive doormat parent who lets my child get away with murder. And that's the paradigm. You're either this or you're that, where the guidance approach is saying, oh gosh, no, don't be a permissive doormat. That is of absolutely no service to your child. But if you do the authoritarian power over, you activate retaliation, rebellion, and resistance. And there's tons of research that Thomas Gordon did on this. It's called the 3 R's. And Gordon talked about the retaliation, rebellion, and resistance. And then Dr. Porter, who wrote the guidance approach to parenting along with me, she said 75% of our behavioral disruptions are actually a response to power being used over someone. And so when we use that power over, we activate the 3 R's, and then we spend 75% of our time dealing with it.
Yeah.
Which is just insanity. We're creating the secondary problems that we're spending all of our time managing rather than getting to the underlying unmet need and dealing with the source of the problem and what's actually going on. And if you become the doormat parent, you basically become extremely resentful of your children. So that was something Gordon talked about a lot, was these resentment flows. You become resentful of your children when you let them walk all over you. They become resentful of you when you use power over and don't take into consideration their perspective. So it's these reverse resentment flows. The guidance approach to parenting is taking it on, let's address every problem that we have. Let's face each and every conflict head on, but let's deal with it from a place of, you're a human being, I'm a human being, you have needs, I have needs, we all have the same needs. We have different ways of meeting our needs that can get in the way of me meeting my needs. Let's talk about that and find ways in which we can deal with our problems collaboratively in a conversation. But each and every one we want to talk about. We don't want to like put stuff underneath the carpet. But parents don't usually have this type of a tool set where they're actually able to address what's bothering them, what they're concerned about, because all they can resort to is the doormat or the power over approach. That's it from their tool shed. They don't have other skills. So that's what I work on.
Yeah, I tried to find that balance. I'm saddened to say I didn't always find that balance. I think I shifted from doormat to authoritarian, but I kind of went back and forth, kind of schizophrenic. And I'm not sure, not sure what lane to occupy, because there was no one like you, at least in my spirit at that time, to say, hey, and all the powers that be. I grew up in a Christian environment, spared a rod, sport a child, but I did not believe in beating. So that made me an outlier. And that was based on what happened to me as a child. I thought there were better ways. So when Alex did something that I considered detrimental, we had a conversation. I did not spank.
Yes.
And so that was an issue, especially when you're married and you have two different parenting styles. So having to see what you're doing with the conscious parenting revolution, teaching people how to have those conversations. Because like you said, I think we don't understand sometimes that children are people too, that have their own thoughts, their own needs, their desires. So how do you approach a parent that is maybe like me. Maybe if I was right now and Alex is still, say, 6 or 7, when we first started noticing Alex's ability to have clear conscious thought. I know they had him before, but by 6 or 7, Alex was pretty much, 2 feet down, Alex's way or no way, and questioned everything. And I mean, and not just question, but very clearly, very meticulous. The kid had a brain that was like, other adults were like, where does this old child come from?
Yeah, this old soul, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, two of the major distinctions that, I talk about a lot in the training is understanding if you have the child that wants to please you. And so that's, under a sort of general heading, we call it the belonger, the people pleaser. They don't want to upset you. If they see you're disappointed, they change their behavior because they don't want to disappoint you, because they feel better about themselves. Their self-esteem is better when the world around them doesn't have a bad feeling about them. And so those kids are easier to parent.
Okay.
So we worry about those kids not knowing how to speak up for themselves because they're always trying to make other people happy. And there's a danger in that. So for the parents that go, yeah, my child's like that, they're always worried about how I feel. They're worried about what's going on for me. And they're so other focused that we say, those are the kids that you need to explicitly talk to about, your feelings and needs matter too. And I'd like to hear more about what's going on for you. The children that are highly autonomous, self-directed, and are prepared to risk your disapproval, those are what we call the autonomous children. And those are the ones that usually are harder to parent because they don't follow the old rule book, which says do as you're told and be obedient and compliant. And they trigger us because we had that rule book. We were made to believe that if we had our own perspective or we thought differently or we said anything, it was an argument and we were being disrespectful and we needed to go to our room. So when these kids act in ways that we were punished for, we get triggered. And we're still trying to work out our own inner child that is still like freaking out because somebody's doing something that's illegal. Right?
That makes sense to me, because I would simply say that for me, in the way I grew up, my mother said jump, we asked off what and how high.
Yes.
When Alex came along, I say jump. Alex said when I get a chance to do that. Like,
yeah,
what?
Exactly. It's not about how high and off what, right? It's about, well, that doesn't fit for me. And my daughter at like 6 was able to say to me, Mom, if I do what you tell me to do, I'm going to be mad and resentful. But if I feel like you're only doing what I want you to do, you're going to be mad at me and resentful. What are we going to do about this? So she was aware of this like setup that one wins and one loses. She was aware that there was this paradigm going on, and I was actively trying not to live in it. And at the same time, find cooperation, collaboration, and support for each other, not because I had the power over her. So this is the bigger context in the conversation that we're in, which is, do we want children to change their behavior because we have power over them, to make their lives miserable, to take away pleasurable activities, to limit access to things that they want, and therefore they change their behavior because they want to get what they want, not because they care about whether it's convenient or considerate of themselves for other people in the room. So they're changing their behavior because they're thinking about what's going to happen if I don't. Like, it totally trains them to focus on their selves, and it teaches a type of selfishness. And that is the danger of a rewards and punishment approach. Not only does it activate the 3 R's, which we spend 75% of our time dealing with, is it also focuses the mind on the child of what I'm going to get out of this or what's going to happen to me, rather than teaching, wow, I wonder what my behavior is having as an effect on the other person. And if that's inconveniencing them, or, if they're okay with it, for them to be thinking about, okay, this is what I'm looking as my preference for my activity. How is that affecting you? So that's when I think we want kids being considerate of each other and thinking of themselves at the same time.
So as you're training it and you have this new mom that maybe I've seen it in my own friends, they have this one kid that I can clearly say, this child is the pleaser, will do whatever everybody wants.
Yeah.
And then you have the other child who's the, as you say, autonomous. And everybody say, why can't you be more like your sister? I hear that so much and I cringe every time I hear it, because my thought is because they're their own separate person.
Exactly.
And I see what you say, that rebellion and
Yes.
all that stuff in that person, because their whole life they've been told they should be like their sister.
Yes, it's heartbreaking. And, I mean, I tell a little story in class about a friend of mine who had 5 kids. And she said if the 5th had been number 1, he'd be an only child. So she had 4 pleasers who were just interested in making everybody happy and not rocking the boat. And then she got the 5th one. And the 5th one was prepared to rock the boat and wasn't going to line up and do as he was told. And he had his own being that was being asserted at a very young age. And we don't want that child to be inconsiderate. So we still want to teach consideration of each other's needs, for them to recognize and acknowledge there's more than just them in the room, that there are other human beings who have needs also. And the work is being able to support that child to stay connected and being able to honor their autonomy and recognize the power of that. At the same time, realizing that they don't want to be like a bull in a china shop, trampling over other people's feelings and needs. So we need to support them to see that, just like learning how to ride a bicycle is a skill, there are other people in the room, and you don't have to give up your autonomy to be considerate. And autonomous people can be extremely considerate, but never obedient and compliant. And nor would we want them to be, nor would we want anyone to be obedient and compliant. And we know from the research that if you teach a child to be obedient and compliant to power, whether it's a powerful peer or another powerful adult, they can't discern when not to be in obedience and compliance. And the number one research study on child sexual abuse shows that children who are trained to be obedient and compliant will do so to their own peril, because they have been trained not to speak up for themselves.
Yeah.
And
Now,
I am a stand for every child having a voice.
That would make sense.
And
I think
we
every child
cannot
should
let them go silent and allow themselves to be abused because they lost their voice, they lost their no. They have to stay connected to their no. And they have to be able to say it when someone who's a big adult is doing something that is not acceptable.
But the problem is that's not something that we are normally teaching our kids, unfortunately. And I did teach Alice that from the beginning, because of my past, that, having the right to say no to who touched them, to include mommy and daddy. No is your right. So, but I don't think that's something that's standardly taught.
It's not. It's what is taught, Brenda, is obedience and compliance. Do as you're told. Don't embarrass me. Don't you make a fuss, young lady. It's all about looking okay in public. And that is an outgrowth of having skills to manage my internal environment when I'm upset, being able to dissipate high emotion, to be staying centered within myself and not merge. These are skills. It's just a matter of teaching a child as they're developing that, at 5 years old, it's okay. We do lose it, and you don't need to be ashamed of yourself, and you can always do a do-over. And if you've done something that you're embarrassed about, well, you can apologize. There are ways for you to be able to speak about what happened without you making yourself shameful.
So like for the young mother, this is her first time. She's going to see this video, and she's sitting there about to go any day. And she's going, okay, these are new concepts for me. How does she learn what you're teaching?
Well, I have my 90-day parenting reset, which is where I would direct her. And if she were to go to the 90dayparentingreset.com, she'd see that there's a webinar explaining also more about what we've been talking about. And then she can fill out an application and actually have a conversation with me, get into my schedule to talk about what her needs are, what she's worried about. I've had new moms come into the program who still haven't had babies yet.
Mhm.
because they're worried about not repeating that transgenerational
Mhm.
pattern that was dysfunctional for them and probably for their parents before them and their grandparents. And so it goes
Yes.
on and on and on, where it's just like this pattern. I talk about it in one of my TED Talks of us having been basically under a spell,
Okay.
and these spells are cast, and we don't realize that we're just living under a spell, that these are actually patterned behaviors that have passed down generation to generation, and that we can awaken, we can become conscious that it's just a pattern. I
Mhm.
don't need to live in that pattern. I'll be so much more effective if I don't.
Right.
And then I will have a much healthier relationship with my child, my inner
Mhm.
child, my outer child, with the world at large, if I can learn collaborative problem solving models that acknowledge when someone else is upset, that they're upset about something in them that is finding it really hard to manage my directives. And
So
it's really just about learning how to communicate.
So you do the one-on-one. Now, what if there was a group of women that said, you know what, we need to get this better? They're sitting around talking, and one of them says, you know what, the way we're dealing with our kids, do you do group coaching as well?
Yeah, actually, most of what I do is group coaching. So
Okay.
if somebody goes through that 90-day parenting reset application, they get into a call with me,
Hmm.
and then they would, if they were like, yeah, this is actually how I want to create my family system, then they come into my group program where I coach every Monday. And
Okay.
then I have the training that is pre-recorded in my landing site on my learning management system. And so that's where I like to work with families and groups of families together, because everybody's problem is everybody's problem. And everything that's happening with this family is happening with this family. And just knowing that you're not alone is actually so therapeutic, and realizing, oh my gosh, this isn't just my journey. This is all of our journey. We
So
all
you
get,
don't just work with the parents, you work with the children as well?
no, I work with the parents.
Okay.
I work
Just
with
the
the
parents.
parents. Yeah. So the training is really for the parents to become educated and
Okay.
conscious, and to have the collaborative problem solving skills to be able to recognize when they're doing what we call the roadblocks to communication.
Hmm.
It's like pouring gasoline on a fire. Somebody's upset and you start to do solutioning and advising and questioning, and they go ballistic, because what they really want is to be heard and understood from their perspective. You don't have to agree with it, but if you can acknowledge what's going on for them so that they feel so seen by you, they
Hmm.
will dissipate. The high emotion will vanish. So teaching parents how to listen and to be able to be present to their children in ways in which their children feel so seen by them. And to
Now, what
teach parents to just see their children beautiful.
now what would you say to the parent that says, now this it sounds really good, the conscious parent revolution, but I didn't turn out so bad and I was taught that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that most people who have gone through, as I have,
Hmm.
I don't know. I mean, everybody's healing journey is different, but I recognized for myself that the clients that are drawn to me
Hmm.
were not okay with it.
Okay.
The ones who feel like all of that's okay and using power over and obedience and compliance, and building the foundation on dependency and fear is that's their jam, then
Hmm.
I'm not their coach.
Okay.
They're not going to be interested in me because I'm not interested in that.
And and that's important to note that, because I find even in my coaching practice, there are certain people you say, that's not my tribe,
That's
because
not
I
my
think differently. And it's nothing wrong with, I don't
no.
villainize you because that's the way you thought. Because I
I'm
can
just
tell you
not
right
their
now,
coach.
there's people in my family that even when they see this video, they're going to be, there go Brenda again with that woo woo stuff. And I don't think it's woo woo. I did not like the way I was raised. And when I got older, and I was that child that questioned everything, I read law books as little, to the point of that I called the
I love
police
that.
on my parents because they didn't speak to me properly. I'm that child.
Oh, honey, I love that.
Yes, I'm that child that
Uh-huh.
questioned
You're my tribe.
everything.
You're my
And
tribe.
she's like, when my mother was punishing me for something, and the way they punished me, I didn't get spanked a lot, because I remember my last spanking, it was at 9 years old. And I
Mm,
had a conversation with my mother after she spanked me, and it went like this: do you feel better now? Because I don't. I
mm,
said, only thing you did was teach me to lie to you in the future. So since that's what you want, and
mm.
she's looking at me like I had two heads, but that was my real thought.
So beautiful that you were so clear and that you recognized, and that is what happens. Parents will say to me, with indignation, my son or daughter is lying to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say, well, why have you created a family environment in which they can't tell you the truth?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, children lie when they know that they can't tell the truth because parents only want to see these 3 behaviors. And if there are 15 or 20 other behaviors, they have to be hidden.
Yeah.
And that I can't be transparent with you because you can't handle the truth. It always reminds me of that, Jack
Yeah.
Nicholson.
Yeah.
You can't handle the truth. Well, a lot of people don't want the truth. They really just want to see that everything on the surface is fine and just that you're being well behaved and that they can be proud of you because they can take you out in public and you're not going to embarrass them, as if anyone can cause you to feel the way you do.
Yeah.
I mean, that victim blame consciousness is that I'm a victim and other people make me feel. And therefore, I have to change them and manipulate them to behave differently so that I can feel better because I have no sense of I am the captain of my ship.
Mm-hmm.
I'm responsible for my own feelings. I get to choose how I'm going to feel. Like some people may hear that and think, well, that's ridiculous. Of course, other people make me feel. And I would say, well, that's ridiculous.
That's ridiculous.
They don't. Yeah, it's not possible. But there is a huge mindset that it is other people that catalyze. I talk about it as being catalyzed, but they talk about it as blame. They're responsible for me. And that's so disempowering to think other people are responsible for us. It's not possible. But, I've been able to stand on the shoulders of giants. And so I was trained, by Marshall Rosenberg, the founder of the Center for Nonviolent Communication, CNVC, the founder of restorative justice. Mm-hmm. So, if you look into the restorative justice movement, it is a movement that is based in seeing everyone beautiful and their behavior is possibly tragic, completely dysfunctional, self-defeating, but it is not who they are. Yeah. And I don't see people as you are your behavior. Mm-hmm. I see that you're having behaviors that are completely destructive to you and others. And we need to talk about that, but we don't need to make you bad. We need to make you skilled.
I like that. But I will say my mother, after that conversation, I never got another spanking, and we did talk and we had a rule, as long as I told the truth. And because I would say, if I tell you the truth, I'm giving you the ability to accept or reject what I did, and then we'll decide what happens from there. And she would just be like, And so I'm sure I was the oldest, but I did have 2 brothers that did not give my mother the trouble that I gave her, because from very young, I was like, that don't work for me. So
I love that. I love that. It makes me so happy to hear that you were able to speak up for yourself, that you could speak about this, that you weren't silenced, and that you had a mother who was able to say, okay, I won't spank you again. I mean, to me, that just, I'm filled with.
She didn't. I can remember the last spanking I got, I was 9 years old after we had that conversation, and she realized, and that was actually when some things in my past was coming out, because by then I had got to the point where enough was enough. Obedience didn't work. And so I had to speak up. But, as I'm thinking about this here now, you're teaching parents how to be conscious in their parenting, to acknowledge that their children have rights, that they have feelings, and that they're people too.
Yes.
When you look back over your own journey with your own child, what do you think you would have done differently before you became a conscious parent?
What would I have done differently if I hadn't gone on this path? If this hadn't been my path, I think it would have been a wash and repeat. It would have been, punishments and rewards. It would have been, you're bad if you inconvenience me or if you embarrass me in public. It would have been thinking other people make me feel. I mean, it would have been that whole wash, repeat, dysfunctional pattern. And I really can't imagine it. I can't imagine it. Having said that, though, I have siblings who certainly did parent in the same way my parents did. It didn't, for whatever reason, I don't know why, it didn't settle with me. I had a brother who took his life by suicide. And so when I look, I mean, honestly, I was much younger than he was, but he was the problem child. And I look at all of those so-called problems and I understand them. I see them as someone who was suffering. I see his experience as being made to feel that there was something wrong with him because he didn't follow the party line, which was suck it up, don't object, do as you're told, don't even think of objecting to anything or asserting your feelings as being important or mattering. That whole way of being definitely had a huge influence, and I'm sure affected why he took his life. I know it. So dysfunctional families are not just inconvenient. I mean, they're life-threatening.
I'm so sorry to hear about your brother.
Yeah. And I look and I think, oh, God bless. You know, if there had been another generation of thinking, he would have been seen as the person he was and the pain that he was in rather than being a bad kid.
Yeah.
And so for everybody who's ever lost someone, you know, I speak into this because I know from firsthand experience that dysfunctional family patterns cost lives. And some people take a life. Other people may be in their skin, but in so much pain.
Right.
It's suffering. And we don't have to suffer like that. We can see each other as beautiful, even when we're falling apart with the tragic expression of our unmet needs and no skills to manage ourselves. But we have to have the skills to see that. You know, they call it trauma-informed therapy now, where we can see the bad, ooky parts of someone's presentation as not being who they are, but being the behaviors that reflect their inner landscape of trauma and pain. And, you know, one of my TED Talks is on the rebellion is here, we created, we can solve it. And it's about school shootings. And I really speak to the fact that a lot of those kids that are the school shooters are also the kids that were isolated, made to feel they didn't belong, who were treated as though they were uncool. And they were so hurt and so angry that this was the tragic expression of their unmet needs, to feel like they mattered, that they made a difference, that they were okay. And if we just gloss over this, this is not a small thing. And this type of behavior around children isn't just in families, it's in schools, where the kid who acts out is made to be the wrong one, rather than seeing that that acting out behavior is symptomatic. It is a problem, but it's the problem behind the problem that I want to talk about. Those are where we're looking at the root causes. That's what really matters, is that we get to the core of this, the source, and we start to address at that level, and we can change everything.
That's amazing. So how does what you've been teaching parents and in your single one-on-one coaching, your group coaching, helping you live your best life now?
I get to bathe myself in this, you know, being able to stay in that core of teaching, which we all know is where we learn the most. I used to say to my classes, you know, for years, I would say, I know you guys are getting a lot out of this, but nothing like me. I get to stay right at the core of the thoughts, of the perspectives, of the mindset. And it lets me stay so on my game, so clear, so present, so conscious. And, you know, consciousness is a work in and of itself. We can fall back asleep so easily. We can fall back into judgment, name calling, making it about my experience of you rather than about your falling apart. And it's not really about my experience of you. It's about, oh my goodness, let me, you know, wrap you in a warm blanket and, you know, give you, you know, an arm around your shoulder and let you know that you matter.
Well, thank you for sharing the conscious parenting revolution with me today, Katherine. If you'll stand by, I want to take the time to thank a veteran. If you ever wanted to thank a veteran and you didn't know how to do it, I'm going to give you the opportunity to do so right now. All you have to do is go to the website above my head here, www.nebcc.org/projects, and join the Basket Brigade. That's where you'll find 12 writing prompts, one for every month of the year. Pick one of them, write a word, write a sentence, write a paragraph, write a story. Just take the time to tell a veteran thank you. It's never too late to tell a veteran thank you. And what will happen with your thank you and all the others that are placed into the basket brigade is Lisa Deshawn, the executive director of the New England Veterans Chamber of Commerce, and her staff will compile all those thank yous and letters and notes of gratitude and put them into a beautifully illustrated book that will then be placed into the basket filled with goodies. And that basket will be delivered to a very lucky veteran on January 1st, 2022, to ensure that they know that they mattered and that someone cares and that someone said, thank you for your service. So take the time to thank a veteran by going to www.nedcc.org/projects. Now, I want to make sure that you know that today, Katherine came on to talk to us about conscious parenting. It is a revolution, y'all, and I want to make sure that you all tap into it. And how do you tap into it? First, you change your mindset about what is parenting. And you can do that by signing up for one of Katherine's courses, her group coaching sessions, or her one-on-one sessions. And we're going to put all the information for Katherine in the description so that you can do it. Once you've tapped in that way by transforming your mindset about parenting, then I want you to announce to the world that you're going to become a conscious parent. Then I want you to get some accountability from someone that's going to help you stay on track to remain a conscious parent. Then I want you to prepare yourself for that. That's by sitting down, having talks with your kids, your spouse, your partner, your friends, and your frenemies about why conscious parenting is important to you. Then I want you to imagine what your life is going to look like when you are avoiding all those missteps, misunderstandings, meltdowns, and miscommunications because you have become a conscious parent. And then I want you to nurture that by passing the word that although parenting can be hard and sometimes difficult, you are not alone, because Katherine is here to help you learn how to become a conscious parent so that you too can join the revolution. So are you ready to tap in and become a conscious parent? I want you to reach out, find Katherine, find her website, read her books, read her articles, listen to one of her TED Talks, go on her YouTube, Facebook, internet, whatever it is that have it. Get the information you need so that you can have a healthy, nurturing, conscious parenting relationship with your child. Katherine, do you have any final words with our audience?
Beautiful. Oh my gosh, you've just been amazing, Brenda. Thank you so much. It's been such a joy to be here with you and to share the journey and to be able to speak to your community and the people who are touched by your beautiful work in the world. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Just remember, everyone, the choices you make today will be the reality you live tomorrow. Choose wisely. Be blessed, everyone.